Okay, Bob, I want to welcome you. We did get a whole lot of publicity out for this ahead of time, so the fact that you showed up is great. Just consider this a practice, okay? So I'll look forward to your helpful comments later. It's a confusing topic. I apologize, but I didn't make it up. The plants did. It's their defense to stay alive is to confuse us and to do their own thing. So the program is it might not be on my first slide, but that's close. Okay, there we go. Saving our harvest for next year's seeds, and it is presented by Fidalgo Seed Share. And Fidalgo Seed Share is a project of Transition Fidalgo. There's a whole display of transitions projects. Here you can see a few of them. We monitor the forest lands to see if things are happening that might indicate changing climate. There are food stands. Yeah, you've probably seen them right outside the library door here at the senior center and at Harbor House. For any of us who have extra vegetables, there's a community garden that was started many years ago. I think that might be where I met Laura, was back doing the community garden. And then Fix-It Days. A lot of you know Fix-It Days. Actually, what I have a pointer. So I'll tell you just a little bit about the transition. But the bottom line is to build resiliency for our community, to make us food secure, to make us a strong community. So whatever else is happening in the world, we're going to be able to take care of ourselves. Maybe not everything, but we can do our best. And we've started ahead of time. Transition started as Beat the Heat in 2006. And that became part of the worldwide transition movement in 2011. So it's been going for quite some time to build up all of these projects. Other projects, so we said the community gardens. I think we've probably got all of them here. I'm Jan Hersey. I am a member of Transition and one of the organizers of Fidalgo Seed Share. I've been gardening most of my life. I started in New England and in North Carolina, and then here, probably equal times in both. And my garden is on Deception Road near the Shrimp Shack. If you ever drive down there and wonder what's happening down in the gully with the hoop houses, property belongs to Lanny Bergner, and I have shared that with him for quite some time. He had a bigger property than he could use. I didn't have enough sun. So this is only though my third year of seed saving. So I've saved tomato seeds for much longer than that, but because I took some online courses, but I have not generally saved seeds. And so I'm self-taught, but I'm not the only one in this group who saves seeds. We've got some experienced seed savers. Sequoia, raise your hand. Sequoia has a farm on Guaymas, many of you know her, and has been saving seeds for many years. She also has a patch where we are growing seeds for the seed share. And we'll have some of those in the display here at the library, which is upstairs. If you're looking for seeds, they're upstairs on the second floor now. The display that we used to have that's shown got moved because they're building the teen room. So we're upstairs back by the elevators. Pretty cleaned out right now, but come January and February, it will be stocked full of seeds. They go fast. So another one of our seed savers is Evie. Evie grows flowers. She grows flowers for weddings, and she saves her flower seeds. So there'll be plenty of flower seeds. Lori Sherman is another member, and she's just a hard worker, and she's trying just like I am to learn how to do this. So my getting this talk together was because we got a grant from Fidalgo Rotaries to expand this program. And so Transition supported me to go take a class from Seed Savers Exchange, a 5-week class, which was wonderful. It was online, it was a webinar, and it was the instigation I needed to put this together. So this is what we're going to try to get you to know today. The easiest and safest seeds to say, I'm not going to go into them now, I'm just going to kind of, just tell you what we're going to talk about. Understanding a plant's life cycle. It's really just about observing, starting to pay attention to your plants, so you know when things are moving from one stage to the next. When and how to harvest them fresh. Fresh is removing the seeds from the stalks or the stalks from the plants. It's disassembling the plant to get down to the seed. How and how long to safely dry your seeds so that they stay safe in storage and they're viable when you go to plant them. Viable means that they will produce a plant. They're safe to plant. And also the best storage methods and some guides. I put some show and tell on the back table if you want to look afterwards, and you can see some of the things that I use. So I'm going to start with pollination because that's where it all starts, right? Thank you, pollinators. And I'm going to try to help you understand the variables about pollination. And I apologize because there are a lot. And they don't necessarily go in order, so I tried to organize it in a way that I would tell you something before you needed to know it for the next step. But as with nature, it's a very interconnected web. The bottom line is that flowers have to be successfully pollinated and fertilized. It's not the same thing. The pollen gets there, but then the pollen has to get down to the ovary and fertilization has to take place in order to produce a viable seed. So here's a little picture. Don't worry, you don't have to memorize any of these things, but the thing you'll hear most is the, you're not seeing a pointer, are you? That's too bad. Let's see if I can put in something that everybody can see. I left the Yeah, I let the battery run out. I charged it and now I forgot to turn it off. So if you look up at the flower on the left-hand side, that arcing line points to the anther. That's the male part of the flower. Follow that down. You're seeing the top of the male part. I'm not going to get into names here because that just gets you confused. When the anther ripens and splits open and it exposes the pollen grains, and they have to find their way to the female part, the ovary, which is on the left-hand picture below the flower. And that bottom part is the ovary. So it's got to come down through what's called the stigma there and into the ovary and fertilize the seed. In that ovary is where the fruit develops. And then the fruit is the carrier of the seed for the next generation. And even without us, plants are doing this because plants want to grow. They want to live on. So here's where it starts to get a little confusing. Some plants are self-fertile. They have a flower that has both the male and female parts of the flower. That's the first one. It's a male. Both the male and the female parts of the flower are in that flower. So the pollen doesn't have to go far at all to fertilize. The pictures in the middle are squash seeds. The female flower is different than the male flower. If you look where it's circled, the female flower has a little bulge behind it. That will develop into the fruit if it's successfully fertilized. The one on the bottom, the male, just has a straight stem. There's no bulge there. And you can actually see this one if you look. It's not something that's so subtle. The male flowers will come out sooner. And people worry because they only see their male flowers. But the purpose of that is they're sending out the pollen. It's kind of like doing their marketing. They're getting the pollen out there for the bees and the other pollinators to go, oh, hey, there's going to be something to some nectar here maybe soon. Then a little later on, and it depends on the weather. A lot of these things are determined by the humidity or the temperature, different conditions, and it probably varies by every plant. But then the female plant will open, and that's when the pollen can get from the male to the female by a pollinator. In the case of squash, it's probably a pollinator because I don't know that wind would get in there. The third set of the spinach has the male parts are on one spinach plant and the female parts are on another. So if you plant a row of spinach, you're going to have a mix of seeds. And so the pollen will be more likely to be wind pollinated. So when the pollen is ready, the wind will spread it from the male plant to the female plant, and it goes into that little intersection there between the male and between the stem and the branches and the axil, and then that's where the seeds will form. So when your spinach seed is ready, it's just like a stem with lots of little seeds, and you can just go and get them off. One of the things to think about when you're doing this is to minimize the detritus, because anything that you kind of get piled in there, you have to get out, so you end up with a clean seed. So you want to try to keep your seeds as free of other stuff as you can. So you need to know when and where and how pollination occurs. And that's just remember, the grains going from the anther onto the surface of the stigma. Different plants have different receptivity as to whether or not they'll accept their own pollen or pollen from a different plant. The pollen is transferred by insects, by wind, by animals. It can be transferred by humans. A lot of squash pollination successfully happens by a human doing that, because if it happens randomly, you're not as apt to get a seed that will grow, they call it true, meaning like the parent. True to seed is what you'll hear that expression a lot. And then the conditions, the various climatic conditions will determine what happens in when. And again, it's not the same for every type of plant. So if you're growing a plant and you know you want to grow a particular seed, do some research on that particular plant and learn what it is, so that you're not frustrated because you haven't seen pollen yet, or maybe it's late pollen to create pollen. So self-pollination, that's one way that pollination happens. And that's when both the male and female plant parts are on a single bloom on the same plant. Like it doesn't require pollen from a separate plant to achieve fertilization. The offspring of the parent plant, the characteristics of the parent plant are going to be the same almost always as what you'll get when you plant the seed. It will be true to type. And these are the safest for beginners. So if you haven't saved seeds and you want to try, self-pollinated plants are going to be the easiest for you to do. And some of the examples are beans, lettuce, peppers. There's some pictures of some of them. Very well. Most of them backwards. So there you go. Okay. Those are some of the open self-pollinated plants. Tomatoes, green beans, lettuce, peppers, and they will self-pollinate sometimes with a little help. Like with a tomato, I can take my electric toothbrush, not go on and use it, an old one. Take off that brush and you've got that little style there, and when it's charged, it vibrates. You take that and you put it next to the stem of your near the flower that's just starting to open. You can help shake that pollen. Sometimes you'll just see a cloud of pollen. And it's pretty fun. My grandson liked to be. It's just like a bee. Bumblebees will come into the flower and they'll do this little vibration dance. And they will literally cover themselves with pollen to go to the next one. This is more apt to be your bumblebee is apt to do that. So then there's cross-pollination, and this is where it gets a little trickier to save seeds. It actually has good points and bad points. So pollen from one plant, again, transferred to the stigma, the female part, of a different plant. Not the same plant, but a different plant. So think of the spinach, okay? It's going from the male to the female plant. It requires external factors to make that pollen move. So it could be wind, it could be shaking it could be a bee, a pollinator. The flowers, was interesting. The flowers don't need to be showy to attract the bees, because if you have wind pollinating it, you're not trying to attract those bees as much as you are. A showy flower will be a plant that wants to attract the bees. An interesting thing about cross-pollination, it may be harder for us to save the seeds because there's more to know, but it promotes more genetic diversity because you are likely to have some mixes of seeds, and the seed might be more apt to adapt to its local local conditions, which is good as our seeds become more resilient and adapt to our conditions. But it results in varied success. So you may get some that are good and some that aren't. The offspring, in other words, the seeds that you get and then plant, the resulting plant may not be exactly the same as the parent. So one thing to remember is, even if a plant is cross-pollinated, let's just say we cross-pollinate a tomato. Maybe I'll give you some examples of some cross-pollination. If a squash is cross-pollinated, the squash that grows from that plant will still be the squash you planted. Okay, you bought a pack of seeds, let's say, and it says it was a joker yellow purple. Okay, but if it's cross-pollinated, the seed that results from that yellow crookneck that you dry and you save the seed and you plant that will have the characteristics of both the female that grew the squash and the male plant that pollinated. So that's where you get a diversion.
And if it wasn't the same kind of squash, then like a male squash from a different kind of squash that pollinate.
You can't, yeah, there are times when it will work and there are times when it won't. Because it depends what families they're in. You get into families and species and gets beyond my paper. But for instance, you don't want a melon to cross with a butternut squash. You're not, but you might have two kinds of squash that might cross-pollinate and it might be okay. So that's how a lot of new varieties happen, is they're intentionally cross-pollinate. So to avoid that cross-pollination, let's say it's something you don't want because you're trying to save a particular kind of seed. You could only plant one variety of spinach, so no other spinach seeds would pollinate it. You might protect it by bagging it. Let's say you have a flower and you really love that color of flower, and you see this a lot on people growing flowers. And I have at the back an example. You have these little mesh bags, like little party favor bags. You can put that over the flower and protect it. Maybe use another flower to pollinate it and then protect it. So no other bee will come along and pollinate that. You can take a whole bag, and which I have a big one back there, and put it over a whole lettuce plant that's sent out with seeds. And then you can time when you plant. You could plant one kind of spinach really early in the season, because you can plant that when it's cool. Or you can plant it now for the fall. So if they're not flowering at the same time, then they won't cross-pollinate. So these are biennials. Now, biennials take 2 seasons to grow. They grow their vegetable or flower in one season, and then it's the next season that it shoots up a stalk and starts to flower. So you have to know that that's going to happen. Sometimes I didn't know that happened, and all of a sudden I'm seeing an onion grow up a flower with a big ball on top. Well, I don't know whether it was growing next to another type of onion, so I don't know if it cross-pollinated. But if I were trying to grow onion seed, I would know enough to keep it separate from any other plants in that family. But biennials are again harder, and I'm not going to go into details because we have to limit what we're confusing really here. But you can see how many plants that we normally grow are biennials. Kale, the chard here, I planted 4 chard seed plants, had 4 chard plants that went to seed. Wait till you see the huge plants it made for seeds. So onions, leeks, carrots, parsnips, they're all likely to, they take 2 years to produce.
So you have to leave those in the garden then.
You do. You have to leave them in the garden, and that also means you have to think about the space that it takes up. Because there's something, let's just say basil, that's not gonna get to be a very big plant if you let it go to seed. It'll make seed in 1 year and it'll take up, not much more than the plant takes up. But if you leave the chard in, the chard is gonna go from a plant like this to a plant like this. And you have to think about the room it's gonna take up and also whether it's gonna shade some. So if I'm gonna save something, I didn't want my chard plant on the south where it's gonna shade what's behind it unless I was planning to plant something there that could tolerate the shade. So these are the kind of things that you learn as you go along, and usually you learn them by mistake.
Yeah, and some people container garden, like I guess I brought my attention to cards in a container for the first year, so I think what you're saying is maybe. Just let it go,
If you wanna save the
don't
seed,
dump it.
just let it go, that's right.
Artichokes, Sandra?
Yes, I had great artichokes. I had like a dozen artichokes on one plant. Those aren't mine, but they had more, that picture had more artichokes shown than, I had 8 on my plants at one time. Yeah, they grow here very well, and they are perennials. So, oops, I just have, so the perennials we won't go into about saving seed. They mostly replicate themselves by root division. You can divide them, but they do make seeds, and you can plant those seeds. But the seeds usually take at least 2 years to give you your fruit. You have to let that plant develop when you plant the seed. So you can plant seeds for all of these things. You just have to be more patient and have the space. So the seed saving process, that's a little different depending upon whether it's an annual, a biennial, or a perennial. Let me just read that if you didn't get a chance to read it. This is funny. This is from this book. I really like it. It's on the back counter there. It's only like $15. It's from Dan Jason, who gardens on Salt Spring Island. He founded Salt Spring Seeds in the 80s. It's a slim little book, and it has in the back of it instructions on growing everything one by one. And I condensed those and put them into a file, and we're going to try to post those on the Seed Share website, so you can go to that. But an awful lot of websites will tell you how to grow plants, but not necessarily how to grow plants for seed. So our instructions would be a complement to, say, to go into other things online that might tell you how to grow the plant. But he says it's easy. He said you go to the seeds when they're ready and get them. You make sure they're really dry, and then you store them. We're so easy. So the annuals, you know what annuals are. Annuals bloom and produce seed in a single year. And so these are all examples of annuals, and we're all pretty familiar with those. Often they just bring a lot of color to our garden, or lettuce, basil. They will die. They won't make it through the winter. So plants evolve. So as you're getting into seed saving, this is where you start observing your plants. So the first picture there of the cabbage, you know what the cabbage looks like. You know what your I'll call it a fruit, because any vegetable that has seeds is actually a fruit. And sometimes it's easier to have one term. So you know what that looks like. But when is that going to start to grow a seed? Well, the next picture to your right is kale. And you can see how that bud started. Now, if you don't want it to make seeds, you can just break that bud off and kind of delay it for a while. You can do that with your basil seed. You keep breaking off that bud. You'll just buy yourself a little more time to collect from the plant. But if you let it shoot up, it'll look like the next one, which is the flower of broccoli. So those are broccoli flowers, much less conspicuous. The one to the right of that, those really pretty white ones, are garlic chives, and they're worth growing just for the flowers. They're so beautiful. And then they quickly turn into a seed head, which is also pretty. So down below, that's calendula, and that shows you the different stages from the flower to the capsule. I'm sorry, it's not a calendula, it's a coreopsis. You can see the capsule that the seed was in as the flower dries, and then the seeds. So the flowering stage, different flowers are designed for different reasons. The bean seed at the top left, those seeds are very closed up. So that's why it's one of the easy seeds to save, because it's not likely to get cross-pollinated. Also, the tomato seed, it's all in one place, it's usually facing down, the pollen can just fall down. And then other seeds that maybe need to be wind pollinated, they're gonna be more open. So nature has a reason for designing flowers the way she does. To the right is the parsley flower, below that is bee balm. And then to the left, amaranth, and I know sequoia grows amaranth, I haven't grown that myself. So the flowering stage is a great time, that's when the pollinators are out. It's gonna start to expand that space you're gonna need in the garden. It adds color to your garden, so sometimes it's just fun to grow them for the color. And it's nice just to grow them for a couple of, attract some bees, even if you're not gonna save the seed. I always try to let a couple of things go to seed, just so I've got something flowering for the bees. So the next stage you want to learn to identify are the ripe seeds. And it can be confusing, particularly down on the lower left, that's the calendula. The first year I didn't know whether the dried petals were the seed, because they look very much like zinnia seeds. But then they formed these really weird little worm-like hard capsules. And so I sent a picture to my friend who'd given me the seeds, and I said, which is the seed here? And maybe she told me that it was these little brown capsules. So then to the right of that dish has the little heads from the coreopsis. And you can see those beautiful little capsules it makes. Unfortunately, it doesn't make them all at once, so they're all kind of mixed in with the flowers. They will fall right out of that capsule. So I just cut them, my hand right around it. I keep my little container there, and I just kick them in, and it makes this wonderful little twinkly sound as they go in. It feels like a reward. You've already done something good, something successful. But again, knowing when the seed is right. Well, let me just go back. I wanted to say, well, actually, I'm going to say this next slide. Knowing when the seed is right with some plants can be tricky, because some seeds will ripen not all at once. They'll ripen, in fact, most seeds don't ripen all at once, but there are some plants, and I'm not going to tell you any names of what this means, but they will drop their seeds while other seeds are ripening. It's just like arugula and kale and chard. Those seeds will fall out of they ripen from the bottom, and as those bottom ones ripen, they split open and they drop their seeds while others are ripening up the stem. So what I read a little after the fact is you're supposed to harvest them when about half of them have ripened. So a funny story is I didn't know that. So when I read it, I quickly harvested them, and then I thought, oh, I've got all this big open space, I'm gonna plant my spinach, and I'll put down compost, I'll have it all cleaned up, sprinkled my spinach seeds, and cover them over, and within days, all these little plants are coming up, and well, yes, it worked. Well, turns out they were kale. The kale dropped all its seeds, so now I have a 4x4 bed of baby kale, which is great because I can just come along with scissors and cut handfuls of baby kale. And the same thing happened with the arugula, which was growing in a different place. I have this huge bed of arugula, which that's how it's wonderful to have, is to do the whole thing. So then to the right, the radish seed, that's really easy because it doesn't go anywhere for a long time, and you have time to pick it and you can bring it inside. The top picture was my garden with 3 things at one time. And I'm thinking about it now that I know more. It'll be interesting to see. I have to go back and look and see when they were flowering. After having the process. But in the back, the tallest one was the kale that turned into the not spinach patch. In front of that, or behind it, or over to the right, the yellow one, that is the parsley. That's one parsley. And then in front of that, the lower one is the chard. And that's just had fallen over. And what I did was to spread a tarp on the ground and just to catch
You sure that starts in one of
In the front?
Right, two radishes are valuable.
Oh, it does look like that. You know what, I was looking at these on my computer, and yeah, those
That's
are,
something for you.
yeah, thank you, thank you. I'm looking, I did this on a laptop, and so I'm not looking at the pictures as large as I. Okay, thanks. So then on the left, the coreopsis, which is that, the bright yellow flower, you can see how it turns into kind of a dry part, and you might think that those are seeds until you wait and see what it actually turns into. So just observe some of the things that are happening first. It's trial and error, remember? And eventually, when it gets down as dry as it's gonna be, you'll figure out which are the seeds. You can also Google it. Some of these pictures I got by just Googling, say, radish seed online, and it'll literally come up with a picture of what the seed looks like. So it's very helpful. And then the middle one is foxglove. So there's a native, and when that's dry, you can just, again, well, actually, you kind of have to pull them off. Those stems are, that attach them are pretty hard. And also the polyhots grow the same way. So the next thing you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna need to think about drying your seeds. The thing to know here is that you want your seeds to dry well. You don't want them to be exposed to moisture or to a lot of sunlight. The sunlight might dry them too far. And the moisture could make them susceptible to rot or to mildew. So you want to be careful. You're going to collect them in your garden in various ways. This was a challenge. You want to, if you have a big plant like a chard, you want to get a piece of rime. You know what rime is? It's that fabric, polyester fabric that you can cover plants with to protect them from insects, or to protect oh, that would be like predators, or protect them from the sun or protect them from cold. So take a piece of fabric like that and literally wrap it. Or I have in the back a bag that you can actually buy. I don't know if the bag would have been big enough to do that.
Pillowcases work.
What does?
Pillowcases.
A pillowcase, okay, there you go. It just depends how many plants you save seed from. So that's another point to make. You want to save seed from at least a couple of plants. And you can find guidelines as to how many plants, because you're trying to get a diversity of seed there. So when you plant that again, you have some plants that will be stronger than others. And you won't just end up, if you happen to save seeds from a plant that didn't do as well as you might have tried to.
Yeah, I had a quick question. It's like, so we're talking about saving seeds, but can we, are there some where you just are better off not saving them and just sprinkling them in the garden and letting Mother Nature figure out?
Sure, that's where you want them. Why do the work if you don't have to? Saving them for me right now is to have seeds to put in the seed library.
Right,
But
right.
my plants did that favor for me, and you'll probably have that happen. And even if you don't want them where they fall, you can dig up certain ones and move them. If you didn't need a field of arugula, you could, dig up 5 plants and move them to someplace where you want them.
I mostly put berries and I have raspberries and every year they put in the canes and they put out these little shoots of the base that can be used to start new raspberries. Does the library need anything like raspberry shoots?
Well, let's address that later and keep it in mind. I know that the middle school garden has had a plant sale, and that might be great for that.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if that's gonna happen this year, but there are occasions when we do need plants. So this picture on the bottom right is my garage right now, filled with things that my seeds are in. Now, I want to point out that some of them are in plastic, but I wouldn't cover them completely in plastic because I don't want to hold moisture in. I use the plastic more like a tarp to carry them. And so the ones that have plastic, I know they're dry, but I just wanted to point that out. So once they're dry, the next thing that has to happen is they have to be removed from the stalks. And this is a time to take care that you don't get any more detritus than you have to. The first thing you want to do is you want to get whatever you can off of the stalks It's a process of getting less and less of the dead plant material till you're left with just the seed. So you may start with on the upper right, you may start with some big screens, and the seed share, we have some great big screens that could be borrowed if you're really into this and you wanted to borrow and you have a lot to sift at once. And when we do our seed threshing, which we're going to have on probably a Saturday coming up in a while, we'll have those there. But at home, I have those round ones, and those round ones fit into what looks like a cheesecake pan, which just happened to be at my garden. But it just fits down in like the bottom of a cheesecake pan, and so you can change out the size of the screens. Sometimes you're screening the chaff, the seed coatings and the seeds are left. Sometimes the seeds fall through and you're left with the chaff. There's no rule to it. You just have to play around and you have to keep repeating it until you get down. So over here, you can see the second photo are just some of the things I've collected. So look around your kitchen, look in a hardware store, look at thrift stores, look at yard sales, and you'll see things that are just perfect for sifting your seeds. The next picture is actually showing a bucket with a colander. There are some seeds that you can spray with a hose really hard. Like you think about a squash seed, it's going to have a lot of, it's called a wet seed, and it'll have a lot of moisture on it. And taking a heavy hose to it is a good way to get rid of the seed. Wind is also a way that seed can be separated from the chaff. On the second picture from the right, that's just using a windy day to separate the chaff, which is blowing away from the seed. And then the far right, Sequoia is using a fan to separate corn there. She's pouring the corn from the bucket, and the fan is blowing the chaff away, and the corn is falling into the box. So it doesn't have to be sophisticated. And one of the things that we're going to get for our threshing is a little fan that could be borrowed. There are times when I get down having seed that's just in a little pie pan, and I'll go out on my deck and I'll hold it and I'll just blow very gently, and you can see that chaff go away. Yeah.
Yeah, so other than it picking up more space, I mean, is there a purpose for taking away the chaff? Like, if I'm just gonna do it for myself.
Yeah, I like.
No, you
I was
don't
gonna
have,
say that if you're just saving it for yourself, and it doesn't matter at all.
no,
It's totally, it's just
It's
like,
just a volume thing, like you don't want
Right.
to store in all this
Right.
volume of stuff.
for yourself,
if you're just saving a little bit of seed from your own garden, and it's,
right,
you haven't separated it out.
yeah. It's organic matter, and it
Right.
can be fine for your soil, but we're packaging seeds to
Right,
give away, so we're not gonna have them professionally clean, but we'll have them as clean as we can.
Do you think those screens would work with the fluff that from a lettuce plant?
No, I have not done lettuce. Lettuce is one of those things. My lettuce went to seed one year. I couldn't tell what the seed was and what the flower was. So,
See the seed distinctly, because that picture of the fluffy lettuce was mine,
Okay.
and it's like a dandelion seed, that fluff goes away, and there's it's a small one, but
It's tiny.
a long, oval seed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you'd want to get down to a, really fine screen, or maybe even like the sifter.
Could you rub it?
And you rub it, that's right. Put your things into any of these strainer type things, and then you can just rub back and
Okay.
forth. But again, you don't wanna, let's just say I had a seed coat that was just gonna come off and stay in the strainer. I wouldn't wanna rub too hard, because I don't wanna break it down into little things and have it go down into the seed. It's trial and error,
Okay.
and you get a feel for what you wanna do.
Thank
So then, storage, you need to store your seeds, again, you wanna keep it dry, you wanna keep it out of the sun, you wanna keep it away from moisture. You can store them in envelopes, you can store them in jars. If you're gonna put it in a jar, make sure it's really dry. If you have some seeds that are moist, then you wanna spread them out and make sure they're dry. It might take a couple days, it might take a couple weeks. You can test that by pushing your fingernail into it and see if it makes an indentation. If it's like a squash seed, you could try bending it. If it snaps, it's dry. If it's kind of bendy, it's not dry yet. If you put it down on a hard surface, not your dining room table, and hit it with a hammer, if it's shattered, it's dry. So one thing I was going to say before, I didn't mention, if it's going to be raining, fall comes and your seeds are out there, you can either, if it's the summer, you could throw plastic over them or a tarp and cover them temporarily. But if it's getting into the rainy season, you want to get them out of the garden. So bring them inside. You can either pull them up by the root or you can cut them off. If you cut them off, you want to think, am I going to hang them up? I'm going to hang them up. I want to leave a little bit of stem. If I'm not going to hang them up, I'm just going to have them in a big bundle, then cut them higher so you have less of that extraneous plant material. So that's just another thing to watch for moisture, watch the weather, get your seeds out of the garden because any prolonged period of rain is not going to be your friend. So that is back to the storage. These are just some of the things that I use, and I put most of those on the back table so you can go look at them. One of the things that's really been a fun way to store my seeds are on the far right on the bottom. That's a photo of it's a little suitcase with plastic packets for photos, but they're perfect for seeds. I have them organized now by season. Originally, I had them organized alphabetically, but I've expanded into 2 little suitcases. And so I found it was easier if I put the cool weather seeds in one, then I could just grab that and go to the garden with it. So it's just, depending on how many seeds, you can just find what works. You can put them in plastic bags again, but if it's wet, you don't want to. You can put those little packs of the desiccants in with your pack. So desiccant is in with those scarlet runner beans. That would be good. That these are some of the books that I like that I've used. Down on the right, you can just find a lot of things online. I'm up in the right hand corner. If you see, it says the seed longevity chart. That's really handy. I got that in a class that I took. It tells you how long seeds last. So when you're labeling your seeds, that was not to mention that. Be sure you label any container that's got seeds, whether it's an envelope or a jar, with the name, the variety, if that matters to you, and the date. Because if those spinach seeds are 6 years old, you should try maybe buying a fresh pack and starting again. But if it's a tomato seed, it doesn't matter. You might have a little lower germination, so you might want to plant a few more seeds if you're determined to get that one Cherokee purple start. But definitely important to do that. But knowing the seed longevity is very good, and you can find charts like that online if you just Google that kind of thing. I'm going to skip this. I was maybe going to put some instructions on particular seeds, but that's where I'll do that online. So here's just a few definitions of things. So, and this isn't to confuse you, but it will. This is just how seeds go, because we hear things, we hear varieties, we hear species, we hear cultivars. This is kind of the order in which these happen. So this is a squash, and look at the poor thing has to have so many names. But you get down here to the varieties. So they're all of these cultivars here are also have those first names and middle names and family names. And then you get all the way out to the right and you get the cultivar. And so different seed companies will produce cultivars that they might be selecting for something that is really disease resistant, or that gives you an early crop or a late crop. So when you're choosing your seeds, if you're buying them, you can look for that kind of thing. But don't worry about memorizing any of this. But this is also where you can help yourself by knowing where your cross-pollination might promote. So you've got seeds that are called, all 3 of these seeds here are going to be likely to be what's called true to type. So you're going to get what you plant is what you get. not 100%, but pretty close. Those are called true to type. Okay, that means the offspring retain the characteristics of the parent plant. Open pollinated, you see that, or you see OP on packs of seeds. That means that there are no restrictions on planting it, and that the plant has been grown enough times that the genetics of that, the natural genetics are kind of baked into the plant, and you will get that kind of a plant. You will get what the parent plant is. And then an heirloom is essentially the same thing, except it's older. It may have been passed down for generations. So heirlooms are also overcommon. Now, on the other hand, you have hybrid seeds, which are a blend usually done either intentionally by a home grower who knows what they're doing, or by a seed company, where they're blending characteristics. They might be trying to select for weed or disease resistance, increased yield, appearance or uniformity, shelf life. Those are the kinds of things that a breeder might be trying to get a plant that does. The sunbolt that we all love so much is a hybrid. So if you have sunbolt seeds, don't try to plant them because it will reflect what the two parents were. You won't get a sunbolt. Although there are tomato breeders, amateur breeders, who try to see if they can figure it out. And then GMO seeds are something we don't really have to worry about. That's more on a commercial level, large farming, big commercial farms. Those seeds have their genetics changed, and they're patented for the most part. That's the ones where you hear if a farmer has one growing in his seed in his field accidentally, he can be in trouble with it. The wind cross-pollinated it. And they're bred for various resistances. It could be resistance to spraying a chemical. It can be a resistance to an insect that has to be present in that certain area.
So are there GMO tomatoes?
I don't know about GMO tomatoes.
Well, the why I ask is that I put some tomatoes in my compost, and I think the compost everywhere, and now I have tomatoes everywhere, and it's a bad problem.
Just try and grow it, see what it is.
Yeah, I was just wondering, well, I guess it could potentially be a GMO, because I don't know, I don't know, because they're everywhere.
We'll bail you out.
I'm not too worried.
No, yeah, the ones that come up from seed, sometimes it's just fun to see what they are.
Yeah.
If it was growing underneath a cherry tomato, it's probably a cherry tomato. Because remember, what you planted with the tomatoes is likely what you're gonna get. So whatever previous types of tomatoes you grew is gonna be representative of that. Then another category that we won't really go into is a land race. You might hear that word, and that just means that you've let that plant go to self-pollinate and reseed year after year. And in a way, it can be good. It can actually offer better adaptations to the local environment. It's just doing its own thing. The ones that let's just say survive, are disease resistant, will survive. The ones that aren't will go away. So there are reasons, and there are people who totally believe in only continuing to grow land-raised seeds. If you find a seed that's been growing on its own and you like it, you can select for it. You can save that seed and then you can grow. But you can try, and maybe you have to protect it depending on the kind of seed it is. But they don't have a fertilizer needs because of just kind of growing themselves. It doesn't cost you anything. They may have disease resistance, and then that's as opposed to ones that are bred for a uniformity. So we did talk about annuals again, remember? Somehow these seem to be a little out of order, but they bloom and produce seed the same year. So your tomatoes, your basil, your chive, well, the chives is a perennial, so that shouldn't be there though. I think I put it in because I thought the bee was cute. Lettuce, zinnias, squash or melons, they're the biennials. The biennials are, remember, 2 seasons. They grow the flower or the fruit the first season, the second season. They, oops, the second season, they'll give you this, the seed pod. And then perennials, they will stay in the garden. And I think, did we see this slide before?
Yeah.
Okay, I moved them, and I think what I did was to copy and paste because I was afraid of losing them. So, okay, well, that was your review. So why save your own seeds? Let's look at maybe the why if you didn't save your own seeds. Commercial seeds lack an adaptation to the local conditions, even though you can opt to get them from a local seed company, which is good. But a lot of seeds might be grown in Missouri. That's where, for instance, Baker Creek seeds is in Missouri. But we could select seeds from here. We could buy seeds from Uprising or Territorial that are near us. Or maybe we just want to think of a climate that might be similar to ours. Maybe some of the New England companies also might have some of the similar climate. We have to think about our short growing season, our temperate winters. Now the Northeast doesn't have temperate winters, but you have reduced plant diversity when you're just growing the same seed over and over. Whereas if you're growing your own seed, you can allow that seed to evolve into something that really is adapted to our climate. But when you have a commercial seed, that's not happening, it's not evolving. Corporations are controlling the food supply. Maybe your favorite seed isn't being grown this year because they ran out and they didn't have enough, and they didn't have a grower to grow it. Because the commercial companies don't grow all their own seed. They have a lot of individual private growers. And I mean, that's a good job to have. Then the commercial seed, that's where you get the support for GMOs, which my reason for not being in favor of them is because of the chemicals. And using things like Roundup or putting in genes that will keep a plant, if you grow on a plant with chemicals in it, that will stay in your gene pool there. And when you buy commercial seeds, you have an increased fossil fuel cost to move all of that around, move the packets of the seeds to the place where they're cleaned and packaged, move them to the stores. And then all of that costs more, to do that. And then you're paying for that. If you don't do that, look at the benefits of saving your own seeds. We minimize and eliminate the need for chemicals. We support wildlife because the wildlife depends on the flowers from what we grow. The insects, the pollinators are adapted to what is locally native grown. The nectar that they are looking for often is, sometimes it's for energy. Sometimes they're looking for something that gives them like a fat for storage for the winter. When we grow seeds that aren't from here, we may not be continuing those characteristics that are going to support our pollinators. With our own seeds, we have a reduced dependence on fossil fuels. We promote our own independence and self-sufficiency, and of course, that's what we're trying to do, and trying to be a sustainable community. And we preserve our local food sources. We're not going to starve. Look at it. We have enough food here to give it away, to put it out on shelves and 3 places around the community every day during the summer. And we save ourselves money. It doesn't cost us that much to save seeds. You might have to buy your tarp or buy your strainer, but it's pretty inexpensive. And then you have the whole satisfaction of the beauty of the flowers and the plants, and the satisfaction of knowing that you did it yourself. And then, of course, most of all, you're building food security and local resilience. So thank you for coming. Thank you for